Welcome everyone to the presentation about Adabas Auditing for COS. My name is Juergen Lind and I'm product manager in the Adabas and Natural Business Unit at Software AG. And I'm holding this presentation today together with my colleague Eric Wood, who will present a product demo later. Before we go into the topic, let me start with some perspectives on the topic, actually. And I would like to start first with the Adabas data itself, because the Adabas data itself is the sensitive data we need to audit the access on, actually, later. So we have a lot of Adabas databases worldwide. A lot of enterprises and organizations run multiple databases based on Adabas on the COS mainframe. And of course, as these databases are used in production, the Adabas databases store and process sensitive data since decades. So, for example, financial data, be it tax data or account data, credit card data, whatever. Personal information like social security numbers, health data, other employee data, driver licenses, whatever you can imagine here. Contact details about customers, so again, personal data, or maybe just corporate secrets, business secrets, yeah, of the respective company. And these databases are accessed by multiple applications or by utilities, by a lot of end users and services. So this is the situation if we take a look at the Adabas data itself and at the sensitive data that needs to be secured and the access that needs to be audited. So let's take a look to the outside. If we take a look to the outside, then we see that in the recent years, and again this year also, we face an increasing number of cyber attacks and data breaches. Here we see 70% of the breaches were caused by outsiders. And I think we can surely say that if it's not an outside breach, then it must be an inside breach. So 30% of the breaches come from inside. A lot of those breaches were financially motivated. A lot of breaches come via web. And around 27%, at least in 2020, maybe it's even increasing by this year, came from ransomware attacks. So it clearly shows that we have an increasing number of data breaches and an increasing number of cyber attacks. So we need to do something with respect to security and also auditing. In parallel to all these breaches and cyber attacks, we also face an increasing number of regulations with respect to security. And in parallel, of course, an increasing number of audits. And a lot of security officers or information officers foresee a wave of upcoming audits. Yeah. Either because of increased regulations or because of more sensitivity to the topic, and then, of course, in the consequence, the need for audits to take place. So we have increased security situation and increased audits, actually. And Software AG is addressing both topics with products. We have the Adabas data, as you can see in the middle. On the left-hand side, we have data encryption for COS, Adabas encryption for COS. That topic is already covered by my colleague, Luciano Pimenta. And on the right-hand side, we see data auditing, Adabas auditing for COS, and that's what I'm talking about today. So what is the auditing about, actually? We need to track all database operations. So it's not just the writes and the changes or the updates, but it's also the read accesses. So each kind of access to the database needs to be tracked. We need to be able to run root cause analysis, yeah, on the current data or even on historical data. So, for example, what happened last year at the same time, yeah, maybe, or even more back. We need to handle high volumes of audit data because all of these databases are run in production, mostly heavy load. So the audit logs will have the same. We'll have to cope with the same data volumes, actually. And in addition, we have very large retention periods. Yeah, so the requirements are very high. For example, in Germany, it's often 10 years, and it's alike in other countries, of course, also. And this also all needs to be handled somehow. In addition, the access to the audit data must be secured by themselves. So the access to the audit data needs to be controlled so that only privileged users have access to it. And we have, for the audits, we have different demands from different stakeholders coming from internal, like DBAs or security officers, but also from external stakeholders like an auditor coming from an external party. And all in all, we need to avoid costs and risks with custom development auditing tools or even manual auditing actions. So all of these are challenges when we are talking about database auditing. And we have the product Adabas Auditing for COS. And with that product, we will meet all these demands for different kinds of stakeholders. So I'm on the left-hand side now here. Adabas Auditing for COS is tracking all database operations. So it's the read and write and update operations. We are meeting the demand of the compliance requirements, yeah, different kinds of regulations that exist for internal and also external stakeholders. Adabas Auditing for COS is an end-to-end solution for high-volume data auditing. So this means you can safely run your Adabas for COS database while at the same time providing the data for the logging mechanism. And it's rather fast and few effort is given. And on the right-hand side, you see different kinds of stakeholders given here as an example, an auditor, a security officer, or a DBA, and they all may have different kinds of questions to the auditing tool. So for example, a security officer might want to ask, we had a security breach somewhere in the past and need to detect which customer data was impacted. Or a DBA may say, I need to track all changes privileged users have made to certain banking accounts, and so on. Yeah. And all of these questions need to go to the Adabas Auditing for COS, and then the result after the query, the result should be nicely reported. That's the product, and that's what it does actually. So from a high-level architecture, how does it look like actually? On the left-hand side, we now at the bluish parts, we see the sensitive data. This is Adabas having the data. And there are different kinds of applications accessing these Adabas databases. We have natural applications, we have COBOL applications, and even other types of applications. We have Adabas utilities that are run, and all those accesses to the database can do something with the data. They can either read it, they can update it, they can create new data, and all of these, let's say, accesses to the database need to be collected. And then we are on the greenish side, on the right-hand side, where we collect all the audit data. We can configure what is being collected, so you can adjust it to your needs. And once the data is collected, you can define searches, let's say in the end queries actually to the data, and the result is reported back. And this is done via a nice web browser GUI. So there you can define your queries, you can even refine the queries, and of course you can view the result data, the resulting data report, and you can store it in different kinds of formats. And the auditing data, that is stored and archived in a safe way. So the security aspects are met, the data retention period aspects are met. So this is the overall solution. Nearly everything runs on the IBM ZOS mainframe. Yeah, Adabas for COS for sure. It's also the auditing machine, so to speak. The back end of the auditing also runs on COS. And the query GUI, the browser-based query GUI, that can run on Windows or Linux, any browser actually. That's it from a high-level perspective. And having said this, I would like to switch to my colleague, Eric Wood, for an even more exciting demonstration of the product. Thank you so far for your attention.
Thank you, Juergen, for that introduction. Yes, my name is Eric Wood, and I'm a principal software engineer with Software AG Government Solution. So I'm going to continue with the presentation to give you a more technical overview of database auditing for ZOS, as well as present a use case for you, and along with my colleague, Adriana Hines, she will actually do a live demo of the use case that I'm going to present. So let us continue. Let's look at the solution on a high level. Notice that there are two colors on the screen. You have the blue, which is for the Adabas Audit Retrieval System, and the green, which is for the Adabas Audit Server function. For the Adabas Audit function, there is a database administrator that configures the Adabas Audit Server by using the Adabas Manager, which is a graphical tool that is used to administer Adabas. This is where we define which files are to be audited on the server side, and then all the related components that will be associated with the audit server. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, on the Adabas Audit Retrieval, there is an administrator that will define all the indices and queries based on the metadata defined in the Adabas server log. The Adabas Audit Retrieval component will import the data that is written to the Adabas log dataset and store that log output alongside with the metadata, the indexes, and all of the data in the archive. Now, based on user requirements, you can set the retention period for that data in this archiving system. So if you need to save the data for 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, that data, you will set the retention period yourself. And then from that point, the auditor will use the Adabas data viewer to view the data based on the metadata and the indices that was set up by the administrator. So let's take a look at how it actually works. So you have your custom application. It could be Natural, Cobalt, PL1, or even Adabas utilities, but anything that makes a request to your Adabas database. Adabas will accept that request, and then it will process that request. And then it will check to see if the files that you're accessing has been deemed to be audited. If that's the case, it will take that information of that transaction and pass it on to the Adabas Audit Server. And then the Adabas Audit Server will write that data and all the metadata to the Adabas log dataset, which is a sequential file. And then from that point, the Adabas Audit Data Retrieval will import that data into the Adabas Audit Data Retrieval database. Now, let's look at a little bit more detail. Again, you have your application that runs against your source Adabas nucleus. Once that Adabas receives that request, it will contain the address control block, the format buffers, the search buffers, all your value buffers as well. And once that request has been processed, Adabas nucleus checks again to see if the file is turned on to be audited. Similar to replication, but it's a little different. The difference is with replication, you only send the changed data. With the Adabas Audited for ZOS, we send the entire transaction. And if you notice, there's some terminology that you see there that is very similar to replication. So you have a destination, same results, where the data is being sent. You have the GFT, which contains the metadata of the field, the formats and links, and all of the attributes. And you also have filters to set rules on what data should be included, what data is excluded. And then you have the subscription. The subscription will use to make a profile of the different files or files to be audited, what commands are to be audited, and which buffers you want to capture, and all of the business data as well as client information and data about the request. That is all captured within the system. On the audit retrieval side, once again, we import the data from the Adabas log datasets into the retrieval system, and then that's where it will build all of the indexes, the metadata, the data itself, the user view, subscription, and stores that in the retrieval database. And then from that point, the auditor will use the database data viewer to view the data based on the indexes that were built by the administrator. So they say seeing is believing. So before we go into the demo, let me set the stage. Let me set the stage for this demo. And this is a very simplistic demo, but because there's a lot more detail in it that I want to save it for Adriana to go over. So here we have a simplistic one. We got one of our favorite secretaries got married and changed her last name to reflect her married name. And this was all done within the employee system. But everybody was curious and wanted to know which secretary got married. So whose personal data was updated? So this is one way of finding out who changed some data. So from this point, I'm going to turn the demo over to Adriana, and she will go through the demo at this point.
Hello everyone. With this video, I'd like to give you an insight on the Adabas Audit Data Viewer as part of the new Software AG product Adabas Auditing for ZOS. My name is Adriana, I'm the one on the left in the picture, besides greetings from Berlin, and I'm a project manager at Beta Systems, which as a new partner supported Software AG in reaching the ambitious goal to develop and launch Adabas Auditing for ZOS. With the direct line to the development departments and over the time of the project, I as a non-technical person have learned a lot, and now I want to share my experience with you. But before we start, let us take a quick look on the big picture. The left side, everyday's business. Accessing Adabas database and adding, modifying, viewing or deleting something, directly or through a custom application, you know that. The auditing of Adabas becomes now possible with the Adabas Audit Server, which can be adjusted to your auditing needs using the pretty handy Adabas Manager. Once auditing is set up and configured, all the log information from Adabas will be collected by the server and pushed to the Adabas Audit Data Retriever. Wow, what a long name! But that's okay, as this application is capable of actively indexing all the data and archiving them for a long time. So it's earned it. The last piece of the puzzle is the Adabas Audit Data Viewer, and this is the application where I would like to take you on my journey of discovery. So let's start. As working in the software industry for about 20 years, in my business life I'm continually confronted with old and new software applications to work with, knowing the possible risks that this entails. As a private person, curious, impatient and playful, I can then hardly wait to get my hands on new applications to try them out. So thinking about the viewer, the first thing that came into my mind was, surprise, surprise, how do I get access, and most important, is this secure? What you need to access the viewer, which is a really small web application, are three things. First of all, you need a browser. I used and use Chrome, but it could also be an Edge, Firefox or Safari, and the URL of course. Secondly, a backend you like to connect to, we call it Endpoint. Do you remember the application with the long name? Correct, that's the Endpoint. Even several of them are possible. And before you ask, TLS is supported in the connection to the mainframe where all data reside. And third, your user credentials. On the mainframe, meaning, hey, it's RegF secured. I will use my locally installed Audit Data Viewer, which runs with the Tomcat 10 and Java SE 16, which is much more than required. And now you see a quite typical login screen. In the drop-down, I only define two different endpoints. I just need to select my backend holding the index data I like to audit. And then I have to enter my ZOS user credentials. So my username and a strong password. By the way, you can even perform a password change. You can use this toggle to show the password in case you're not sure if you entered it correctly. And now you see I didn't use a strong one. So let me hide it again and then I can enter my real password. And that's it. Welcome to the Adabas Audit Data Viewer. That's how the application looks like. So let me ask you a question. What would you do next after having access to a new application? I'll tell you what. I often think of, am I able to adjust anything, or do I even have to? First of all, I want you to know that as a user, you can start to work with the viewer right away. There is absolutely no compelling reason for additional configuration. but there are a few nice options to customize the viewer to your needs. In the upper right corner, there is this user icon where I can select my user profile settings. The first parameter has something to do with a feature I will show you later in this video. I'll leave it to the default. I guess the second parameter doesn't need an explanation, just let me quickly change it to international. And the third sets a limit on how many lists will be displayed while searching, an option to improve the browser performance. More interesting is this little checkbox here, as this has a direct effect on how the search masks later will be presented to me. Checking this parameter will remove specific search fields that are theoretically available, but doesn't fit to my current search based on my file selection. And don't worry, in case you like or need to see them later, you still have the option to use a toggle to show them or not. But here you set a default behavior. I personally like to hide everything I don't need or cannot use, so I'll activate this and then save my new settings. Another way to adjust your viewer affects the displaying of tables. When displaying a table, use this little cogwheel to open the table settings to set the row height, piece of cake, or more important to me, to select and rearrange the columns. And that's what I like to do now. With the check mark, you select from a list of available fields the columns you like to appear in the table. So let me remove the submit user, I'm sure Stefan won't be too upset about this, and the extension. And instead I'd like to see the tenant, a title would be nice, and the line counter. You can also rearrange the position by a simple drag and drop. I think the tenant should be first, but the title, I don't know, is just more like a note to me. So let me move it a bit more down, meaning to the right when the table is displayed. And even renaming is not a big deal, as you can see. Whatever you do, it changes the appearance of the table right away. You can see this in the background while I'm changing the column subscription name. There. After you saved your adjustments, from now on this will apply to all tables. And in case you're not satisfied with the changes you made but can't remember the original settings, then just restore them to the default. Well, I think you have an idea of what you or an auditor can configure to work with the viewer. As I always love to say, sometimes less is more. But I think now it's time to use the viewer to its purpose. So the question I'd like to answer is, how does the search work and how flexible is the viewer? Oh dear, I know you can't wait to see the viewer's main functionality right now, but let me first step into the concept of indexing the data. When dealing with big data, performance is always an issue. Try estimating yourself how many Adabas auditing log files might be written in your system environment in 10 years. So the search process is separated into several steps using dynamic layouts and predefined indices to make the search more comfortable while increasing the chance to get the results you're looking for. At first, select a subscription provided to you as defined in the Adabas Manager and do a global search over all files that belong to this subscription. Here, it is helpful to have a specific index defined, we call it a global index, to identify all log files containing the data. Quite typically for a global index in HR data, for example, could be the personal ID, or from an administrator's perspective, the Adabas command or the ID of the performing user. And don't worry, you are able to use mass. Who the heck knows all IDs by heart? When doing this global search, there's just one simple but obvious rule to keep in mind. The more specific, the higher the performance in the whole process. The result of the search gives you back a number of files including descriptive meta information where the search criteria do match. You can then select the audit files you want to do your research on in more depth. And from now on it's time to drill down into the data, or as we call it, do a search refinement using more specific criteria provided by the already defined layouts, dynamically fitting the available indices in the selected files. At each step of the process, you can go back even several steps, in case you like or have to change something in your research. In conclusion, as I love to visualize everything, think of the search process as a treasure hunt. Subscribe to a trip and limit the area, select the spots you want to dig into, and then drill down till you find it. Maybe this picture helps you to understand as it does to me. And that's how everything looks in the viewer. On the left you can see the subscriptions I'm allowed to access by RegF, and in case the list is too long you can use the filter above to get the right one. The huge space on the right is for displaying interim findings and results at the end. If you expand the subscription folders, here organized by tenants also, you can see all the available predefined layouts that can be used for the search. I will choose the one holding all employees information in the beginning, as I'm not sure by now what I'm going to find, but I have a range of personal IDs to check. With a click, a search mask opens, fitting the selected layout, which I can change on top of the search model, if I like to. For example, selecting this gives you the opportunity to search for a specific database command. But let's switch back to the former one. What I do know is a date range for my search. Let's take the last year, and that the employees of our US offices have a personal ID starting with a 3. I guess. Or, was it a 2? Honestly, I can't remember. But let's go with the 3 as my starting point. Next, I can select the files I want to take a look into. Here, the result just shows one hit, the downside of using a non-productive demo system. But I assure you, if there are more files, you can go on by selecting all of them, or just a few, or only one. It depends on you. The search refinement will always work on those selected. In the refinement, I will use the same search as before, but limiting the results to job descriptions starting with an S, as I hope to find not only sales representatives, but also support engineers, senior analysts, or singers contracted, whatever. And that's the result I will get. I have to admit I'm not satisfied with the result. There should be more findings. It seems to me that this might be employees data of our UK department. Perhaps the personal number started with a 2 after all. So let's go back using the breadcrumbs above to repeat the search process using the same subscription and layout. Yeah, this looks better. But wait, why did our secretary get so many hits? I mean, there's only one in the US, so all I see here has to be her. As you may recognize, my ambition has just aroused to find out why she, or better her data, got these findings. So again, let's go back in the search process, but now by just editing the last search, as I like to focus on her data only, with the advantage that now I know her personal ID. Okay. And now I can see all the transactions affecting her data. And that's it. As simple as that. As you could see, the concept of the search process, going back and forth with the option to switch between the layouts or by modifying a former request, gives you the flexibility you need to search such big amount of data, especially when doing a forensic research, for example, where you don't know in the beginning where everything leads to in the end. I'm happy now, and I think it's time to reap the benefits of my search, and I can't wait to find out what's going on with those secretaries' data. So, what will I be able to see as a result? For viewing the details of your findings, just click the record. On top, you'll find the event that has caused this entry in the Adabas log. I am not an Adabas expert, and between us I actually know nothing about Adabas, but I'm sure you recognize that immediately. Oh no, I mean the title of the entry, not that I'm not an expert. Well done, Ariana. I'm probably the laughingstock of our company for a few days now. Never mind, just get up and move on. In the info section, you can see all the system information about what happened, when, caused by whom, especially in case of data manipulation or espionage. That's the essential information you like to have. Collapsing this section reveals another one called Data that holds all tracked information on the data entry itself. And if you are a database administrator or a system programmer, then you might be interested in some other background information you will find in the other tabs, such as the LPA the log is coming from in the client info or the specific command in the request info. When working with the viewer for quite some time, you will also notice that the number of tabs will differ depending on the track command. And there's a simple reason why. Reading or searching for data doesn't matter, but every update will provoke the system to override the old data with the new ones. Like a makeover in any TV show, there will be a before and an after image. And that is exactly what the viewer will display in two different tabs called DSBI before image and DSAI after image. Likewise, adding data to the database can only cause an after image, while removing data left you behind with a before image. Comprehensible, isn't it? But let me return back to the secretary data. Since the number of entries is manageable and I don't want to open and close each one separately, I can also simply use the navigation bar to view the next or previous entry. And lo and behold, besides reading access and researching the data, there was even an update in between. It's a pity that the logging for before and after image was not activated in the manager here, but that's not too bad, because the data seems to be sorted chronologically. So let's see what has changed. Alright, looking at the last name and the marriage status, I guess congratulations are in order. Hopefully I don't forget. I guess this is a good time to stop here with the demo before I start sidetracking too much. Moreover, there is still a question I always have to ask. Is there anything else useful that I should know right now? And the answer is yes, of course. In order not to go beyond the scope of this video, I'd like to mention only two not so obvious functionalities. One is explained very simple. In the results view, when displaying the content of your hits, there is an option to download the results in a special so-called A-log format for further processing. If you're firm with downloading files from a web application, there is no magic on how to do that. Hit the button, select the location, name the file, and click Save. For the other functionality, which I do not want to understate, we must now travel into the future. Think back to my search today in 2021, but imagine it is now 2031, so 10 years ahead. Again, do you remember the application with the long name because it can hold all kind of data for a very long time? It can do so and still being resource efficient by setting old data to offline and migrating its archive with an option to retrieve the data when it's needed. But the more the data you have and the older these are, the longer a search request might take rummaging through this archive. In order to prevent sitting idle in front of the screen just waiting, the viewer recognizes the data as offline and starts the search query in the background so you can go on with whatever you do in the viewer. This is called a scheduled report. Next to the user icon in the upper right corner, you can click on the clock to see which search queries, you can give each one a name you like, have been scheduled and what's their status. And as soon as the data is available online again, you can then see the result of your search by clicking the report. And referring back to the user profile, the parameter pooling time, that was the first one, determines after how many seconds scheduled reports are updated. Now, phew, seems we're at the end of this video. Let me sum up. The Adabas Audit data viewer is secure. Check. It's modern and dynamic. Sure. It is pretty revealing when it comes to get an in-depth look into any Adabas database transaction that took place, and it has some practical additional functions. And don't forget, this is only the first version, so you can be curious what helpful functions and improvements there will be in the future. I hope you enjoyed my tour de force discovering what the view is all about, and if you are interested to know more about Adabas auditing for ZOS, feel free to ask your Software AG contact person of trust. There's only one thing left I'd like to say now. Stay safe, stay curious, and thanks for watching.
Wow, thank you, Adriana, for such an upbeat presentation. I hope everyone really enjoyed that presentation. But what I would like for you to do now is stay tuned for future webinars on our Adabas Auditing for ZOS solution. We will take a look at a more deep dive and more intense case scenarios where we actually have case studies of a colleague stalking the women in their department and finding out who was the stalker, as well as who created reports for employees that were making top dollar for extortion. So stay tuned for what's coming in the future. And I hope you enjoy this presentation, and we thank you for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day.